My name's Dave DeBow, founder of MoneyPartnerFormula.com, and this show is built for everyday real estate investors who are actively doing deals and looking to scale using other people's money. So if you're an active real estate investor and you want to get featured on this show to talk about your own real estate and capital raising experiences, then just go to daveinterviewyou.com. Now let's get rolling with this episode, and remember to subscribe for daily interview content. Hey folks, welcome back. Another exciting episode. Today, zooming in from Atlanta, Georgia, we've got Mr. Frank Iglesias, who is a very experienced real estate entrepreneur. You name it, he's done something around it. So single family homes, fix and flips, wholesale deals, and even construction. He has a lot of experience in real estate. So Frank, looking forward to chatting with you, finding out a little bit more, and as well as what your thoughts are on the whole construction development side of things, because that seems to be a lot of people's focus these days. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate you taking the time to have me. I'm happy to be here.
All right. So tell us a little bit about how you first got interested in real estate investing, and then just really, really briefly, what your trajectory has been.
So I'm a former IT professional, was doing that for 15 years, and somewhere it was around year 11-ish, I got the email. To this day, I don't know where it came from, but it was to go to a Rich Dad, Poor Dad 2-hour seminar or whatever it was. Yeah. And I had an interest in real estate, right? So I was like, okay, well, for whatever reason, we just went. And of course, like many people, and this is back in 2008, you go to that and your eyes go, oh my goodness. And, that led to the 3-day event, which led to the buying courses, which then led to buying our first property in January of 2009. Mm-hmm. And, that whole sequence it was probably about 5 months-ish, somewhere around there. And so, we were action takers. We took it, we learned it, and then we just dived in.
All right. So that's your first deal, 2009. Quickly run us through, what has your real estate investing, your activities look like since then? So what kind of deals have you done?
So the first few deals we did were BRRRR deals, except that phrase didn't exist back then. It was just buy, fix, rent, refinance, carry on. And then
somebody figured out how to combine.
Yeah, someone made a marketing term a few years later. Back then it was just, you just did it. There was no term for it. And we started doing some flips. Then we got big in the wholesaling and was like, wow, this was great. I left IT. That was in 2011. We left IT, and then
you just full-time into real estate.
And we went full-time, had no idea what we were really getting into, but it sounded good at the time. And so we just developed out. Then the flips got bigger. We got into larger stuff like additions and whatnot. Somewhere in there, I guess it was 2012, 13-ish, we bought our first short-term rental. Of course, back then it was called HomeAway and VRBO. There was no Airbnb, at least if they existed. We certainly didn't know about it back then. We called it vacation homes. Mm-hmm. So we've been in that business for over a decade to some capacity. And then we started getting into new construction really by accident. We actually bought a large scale rehab in Atlanta. We thought we were just going to gut it and redo it. Mm-hmm. And then we had some contractors look at it and they were like, have you ever thought about building new? And of course we're like, no, but we got it so cheap, we were able to take some time to learn about this thing called new construction. Next thing we know, over a span of months, we ended up doing just that. We built our first house. That was exciting. And then, like so many first deals that are exciting and profitable, you initially think it's always going to go that way. We all know that is not how it works. But we ended up building several more houses. We kept doing some flips and rentals and so forth along the way.
Yeah.
And when the inflation thing hit, we started hitting the brakes. We're like, okay, this is getting out of hand. And now 2024 costs are extremely high. And, unlike back in the early days where really for a span of several years, it wasn't hard to find good deals. Now it's like, wow, you got to put some real effort in to find some good deals. It's a bit harder now.
So not so much about the new construction you're talking about. It's hard to find good deals for wholesaling, or what do you mean?
Just where the numbers pencil out to make it worth the effort. It doesn't even matter. Wholesale is probably going to be the easiest one, but like for numbers to really pencil out for the risk and the time involved, especially if new construction, of course, our standards went up over time, right? We got better and better and better. So our expectation got higher. When the expectation gets higher, you got to buy lower, right? Because we got to make sure we get the quality. The big thing I learned from new construction, well, one of many big things was where I'm at in Atlanta, you have to warranty them for at least a year.
Oh, okay.
And it's not optional. You have to do it. So I learned if we're going to build a house, this has got to be good. Like we can't do it. We're not talking about a little cosmetic tweak here or there. The structure's got to be good. The framing's got to be, and so it kind of slowed us down because we
No wonder your
realized
expectations have increased over time.
exactly because I want to make sure I was putting out a quality product. And one of the things I learned was contractors were not necessarily committed to that. And that was
because they weren't on the hook for it at the end of the day.
correct.
Right? You're
Something breaks a year later, I call a contractor calling me.
Yeah.
And so I learned that we really had to have our hand on that pulse to make sure anything we built was a high quality product.
Well, that's interesting, Frank. So some of the people that I've interviewed that are in the business come from the construction background. They have their own crews, they're their own general contractors, so they're pretty comfortable with that. But it sounds like you were hiring outside contractors, kind of you were managing the projects, or what do you guys, I mean, you're putting everything together. Were you involved in the design of the projects? What did you kind of actively do besides find the property and manage the crews and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we ended up having our hands in all the cookie jars by accident.
Okay.
Because what would happen is, and I'll give you two examples. One is you talked about the design. So we would go work with different architects. The problem is they would do their thing. And of course, we just trusted that they knew what they were doing. And to some degree they did. So we're not going to say they didn't, but they just it wasn't that they didn't know what they left too many gaps. And so when there were gaps, misprints, errors on the plans, and by the way, for everyone listening, just as a municipality reviews it for permitting does not mean it's right. I got plenty of plans that got permits with errors that we had to fix in the field. And so there was a lot of expensive growing pains that went through that correcting mistakes that I never thought existed, much less had to now learn about to make sure it was correct. Second of all, I learned when we were hiring builders, in particular for new construction, we had this naive mindset where if you get your general contractor license, most of these people rehab, but only a small portion of them built. So the way it was presented to us was these new construction builders are like a next tier higher because there's a small bunch of them. So it kind of presents itself like a niche.
Yeah.
And what we realized was nothing could be further from the truth. And so it actually
they're no better than the rehabbers, maybe even worse.
No, actually the rehabbers were much better. Those were actually much better GCs. And here was the reason. It didn't make sense at first, but then I have a colleague, and I've met a few colleagues, but a couple in particular, and they explained to me that all builders are not the same. You have your production builders, you have your custom builders, and then you have your spec builders, which, it's three different products. Well, your production people, they don't really have to think. So yeah, they're builders, and yeah, they're building 100 homes a year, but the reality is they're not having to put a lot of thought in this. Everything's preordained,
right?
It's cookie cutter. They don't really have, and so I would hire some of these guys and put them on these projects. And what I found was they couldn't solve problems. And it was mind blowing because I didn't understand. It just didn't make logical sense to me. But then the custom home builders, those guys, they're doing everything for their customer. Well, those are very slow moving projects, because, and that's its
Crazy
own
expensive.
market, crazy expensive.
Yeah.
So we're in the middle, right? We're that spec builder. And so we're kind of that hybrid. And then what I realized was we're like, hey, well, let's hire a builder and he'll build 4 or 5 houses. Well, each of those was like a unique product.
Mm-hmm.
And so after some time, we realized, wait a minute, this is like building 5 custom homes at a time, all with their own thing going on. Yeah, they might look similar on the outside, but everyone was its own beast. And so we realized our learning curve went like this.
Yeah.
But our stress curve was right behind us.
Yeah, I would imagine.
So,
So what did you do to kind of solve that issue? Did you start? Well, I mean, obviously it's all about finding that good spec home type contractor or a few of them. But yeah, how did you solve that problem? Or did you?
well, it was a mix. It was a mix of working with builders and then managing some of it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
Working with a GC kind of as like oversight kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so I basically became a builder by accident
Yeah.
because I was so committed to this has got to be a quality product. And so that's how I looked at it. I looked at it as reversing the end product has to be solid. And so if Frank had to roll up his sleeves and get dirty and make sure that thing was solid, then that's what I did. And so, some of the things the trades were took care of, but then you realize not only do we have a bunch of houses, we have a bunch of styles. There was modern, farmhouse, contemporary, shotgun, bungalow, historic, not historic. So it was like, it was like drinking out of a fire hose set to full blast for a few years.
So we were talking a little bit before we hit record that you're looking at pausing the building side of your real estate business for a while, maybe until the inflation comes under and interest rates get a little bit more reasonable. Um, if you were to start again in a few years or do it again in a few years, Frank, what, if anything, would you do differently?
Hire the right people. It's the right people is what makes it work. And finding quality people is hard.
Yeah.
So 2 parts, costs have gone up significantly. I mean, building in my market now, roughly 70-75% more than 5 years ago.
Wow, that's hard to
So
make.
that was a big driver to slow it down. It's like, it's just expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And so the numbers just don't pencil out. So you're working just as hard for to higher standards for less money. So that doesn't make sense.
No.
But the people part of it is so key. And the best, I like to tell this story because it's a true story. Once I started figuring out some of these builders were not working out and they couldn't solve problems the way I needed them to solve problems. Which really was just be a problem solver, not I don't know what to do because I didn't have an army of $10 million to figure it out before I showed up kind of thing.
Yeah.
So, praise God for DR Horton and those guys, but it's a science, right? That's why it's production. They got it all figured out. So the field guys don't do that much. So we fired some of these guys and then we go to interview some more. And the best one was a gentleman, and I would chat with them, and it was always a nice conversation, and they would tell me why they were great and so forth, and that was fine. And I would always end with this: why should I hire you? And this gentleman in particular said, well, I've been doing this for 35 years. And I said, well, so is the guy I just what else do you got? And this is what he said. He said, well, I have all these subs that have been with me for all these years. And I said, well, so have some of the last few guys, but then when we need them, they magically disappear.
Yeah.
So after that, he was out of reasons, and we're like, I guess it's not gonna work out. Because I'd heard that. And, and I realized, and some of my internal team was telling me, Frank, these people are just telling you what you want to hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized I'm a slow learner sometimes, right? It was like, right, that is exactly what's happening. So once you pick up on it, you realize what do you, Mr. and Mrs. Contractor, really bring to the table that I should hire you? It was always standard answers. So it was no longer compelling. I was like, well, we got a job site, so I guess we'll keep searching, but in the meantime, we're gonna keep moving as well. So, so it's really about the people, finding quality.
So how do you figure out who to hire then? I mean, if everybody gives you the same answers, so how did you finally decide to hire that guy who was good but had the same answers as the other ones?
I think the biggest factor I found in people that work for us as investors is, as a contractor, they've been responsible for the money as well. And that was a bit, and that one factor narrows the pool down, because there's a lot of builders. And by the way, some of these guys are good at what they do, not slamming on, there's plenty of good ones. But if they've never managed the actual budget as an investor, that it has to hit budget, or at least have some semblance of a budget that makes sense, so that it's a profitable project at the end. Reasonably, there are always some things you can't control, but generally speaking, that made a huge factor. So when I would,
if I'm understanding you correctly, you're saying if you find a contractor who's done their own spec homes as the active investor,
yes, and
that's
was responsible for the capital.
Yeah, and use their own money, basically.
Yeah, they use their own money, private, hard, whatever. They were responsible for making.
They did their own. They've done their own spec home deals, soup to nuts kind of thing. A to Z. Got it. Yeah, that would be good.
Yeah, because
so that only comes through conversations and finding that out. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have architects design stuff that they'd be good ideas, but the cap cost was astronomical. I was like, yeah, if we had no budget, this works.
Well, it sounds like a lot of lessons. So what are you planning on doing for the next little while, instead of doing these new construction deals?
We're really focusing on just deals that can create cash easily. So kind of going back to my roots, the wholesaling, maybe some small flips, quick, easy things, strong cash flow deals. And cash flow deals look different now than they did 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I took a lease option class, or I took a foreclosure class. I was one of the rich dad, buy a foreclosure, fix it, rent it, make your $200-300 a month, and you're good. That doesn't work today. If you make $200-300 a month on a rental and one thing breaks, you're behind, right? So that doesn't work anymore. So it's got to be strong cash flow deals. So really just looking at deals that can happen relatively quickly, if not very quickly, and can be profitable quickly. Because it's a lot of effort, and if it's not going to produce quickly, save the stress.
When you're doing wholesale deals, a big part of that is lead generation for motivated sellers. What do you find works best these days for doing that, Frank?
So one of the things I'm finding, and I'm still finding, but the big thing I've learned is it's different. Wholesaling now is different than it was years ago. Okay, sellers have equity. They all have Zillow, which is the authority, whether it's right or wrong. From the seller's eyes, Zillow is the authority. And they have no reason to trust anybody calling them saying, we buy houses, because they've heard it all from a million people.
Right.
So now it's about, we got to be patient. We got to build those relationships. We have to give them a reason to trust us, that we're not going to be like the other 20 postcards or 20 cold calls they got or whatever. So I think that unique selling proposition, that business term we've all heard, I think is more important than ever. And that's something, quite frankly, we're still sorting out ourselves as we're getting back into it. It's like, okay, this is a different game. We're dealing with educated sellers. Do they know everything about their property? Probably not, but they're a lot more educated than they were 10 years ago.
Yeah, big difference. So what's kind of your gut feeling that your USP might be, or what are you starting off with that's different? Because there's tons of competition, like you say. They've gotten 20 other postcards or calls and all that kind of stuff. How does one stand out from the crowd? What would be a good idea, example of a USP?
So I think the first thing is the ability to just listen.
Mm-hmm.
That it's not, hey, how quickly can I put an offer in your hand? Obviously, you want to put an offer in their hand quickly, but it can't be about that. It's got to be all about them. What do you really need? And am I really listening to what you're saying so I can meet that need?
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not quite getting that need, am I asking the right questions to find out that need in a way that's beneficial to them? So I'm just look, because again, they have every reason to be skeptical.
Yeah, for
We've,
sure.
and truthfully, the investor community as a whole, we've given them every reason to be skeptical, right? Because they've all been cold called, they've all been direct mail, they've all done how many text messages and RVM and whatever technique is out there.
Yeah.
So I think it's really getting back to that human connection, and that takes work. That takes work.
Yeah, it's hard to shortcut that one. Well, Frank, this has been great. If people would like to find out more about you and what you do, where can they go?
So the best place to find me is my website, frankiglesias.com. That's the number one place to go. Or just call me, call our office. Our number is 678-408-2228. We're a little bit old school. We answer the phone. If not, leave a voicemail and we do call back.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for your insights, Frank, and I hope things go well with the shift of focus. That's the thing about being an entrepreneur, real estate or otherwise. It's always seems to be bobbing and weaving, like coming up with new stuff, right?
Absolutely.
All right, everybody, take care, and we will talk to you on the next episode. Bye-bye. Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And as always, if you want to listen to more daily interview content, make sure you subscribe. And if you're an active real estate investor and you're doing deals and you'd like to get featured on this show, then just head over to daveinterviewsyou.com. Now at moneypartnerformula.com, we help real estate investors to create a process for predictably getting capital so they can do more deals without relying on hard money lenders or the banks. We do this by building them a private capital marketing system. Now, if you want help turning yourself into a big money capital attraction machine, then book a call with our team to see how we can help. Just visit moneypartnerformula.com to find out more. All right, take care, and we'll see you on the next interview.